Welcome to the Female Stoic podcast. My name is Stephanie Poppins, and I am an advocate for literary empowerment. That means I believe the examples set by the literary masters can broaden our life perspective, create increased self-awareness, and empower us to overcome the obstacles we encounter here in the 21st century. By listening and referring what we hear to Stoic philosophy, we can foster a strong sense of self and navigate the world more effectively. This podcast takes the form of both discussions and meditations. And if you like what you hear, you might consider looking me up on my socials, where I post empowering videos every day. Or you may like my classic audiobooks and original stories available on my website, neworldbooks.uk. Happy listening. Welcome to another episode of the Female Stoic podcast. On today's episode, we are looking at Stoic acceptance of the natural order of things, and we are referring to the Greek myth, Persephone and the pomegranate seeds. If you don't know the story, check out my audiobook, Myths and Legends, wherever you listen to audiobooks, and if you have trouble finding any of my audiobooks, head to Neworld Books and there are many links there. If you don't know the story, check out my audiobook Myths and Legends wherever you listen to audiobooks. If you have trouble finding any of my audiobooks, head to Neworld Books and there are links there, or you can complete the contact form to receive my newsletter with updates on my work in progress, both original and classic stories as well as the Female Stoic Journal. And if you head over to Insight Time, you can see my weekly videos and original audio drama episodes. So, Persephone and the pomegranate seeds, a Greek myth originating in 6th or indeed 7th BCE. This served as a mythological explanation for the changing seasons and the agricultural cycle. So what was Greek mythology? Well, it wasn't created by a single person or as a conscious piece of fiction. It evolved as an oral tradition over centuries. These stories served several vital purposes in ancient society. To interpret the environment and recurring phenomena, for example, the changing of the seasons or the meaning of lightning and different extreme weather, looking at legendary heroes and flawed gods, which help define social values. So myths and legends offered practical advice on how to live, and they warned against negative traits. They were also used to preserve history, to recount historical events, ancestral roots and early explorations. They blended fact with legend to help the Greeks maintain a connection to their past. So Persephone and the pomegranate seeds, if you don't know the story, Demeter was the Olympian goddess of agriculture. She had a beloved daughter called Persephone, and one day as Persephone was picking flowers, she was abducted by the god Hades. Hades was the ancient Greek god of the dead and king of the underworld. So Hades took Persephone to his dark underground kingdom, where she was forced to become his unwilling queen. Demeter, of course, was distraught at this mysterious disappearance of her daughter, and she travelled the earth looking for her daughter in vain. While she wept, the earth became barren and there was much suffering. Eventually Zeus took pity on her and arranged for Persephone to return to the world of the living. However, Hades tricked her into eating 6 pomegranate seeds, for each of which she was fated to spend 1 month every year living with him in the underworld. So these fruits and grains of the harvest, sacred to the goddess Demeter, were now provided by her only in due season for part of the year. And as we know, this ties in with the seasons of the year that we know today: spring, summer, autumn, winter. Persephone was likewise only with her mother for part of the year, symbolising these cycles of nature and the transience of all worldly things, even our loved ones. And that is the key to this story. This is a myth about coming to terms with loss and impermanence. And the depiction of this abduction, if you can see it online or indeed have ever travelled to Rome, was never more beautifully done than in Bernini's sculpture, which he created between 1621 and 1622, The Rape of Proserpina. And that stands today in the Galleria Borghese in Rome, Italy. This is a breathtaking Baroque masterpiece, and in fact, Baroque is one of my favourite architectural movements, and it's carved from a single block of marble. Fantastic. His genius is seen in the brutally realistic interpretation of the struggle between Hades and Persephone, wherein Hades' fingers are pressed into Persephone's thigh, whilst a weeping Persephone attempts to push his face away from her. Very powerful, check it out. So how does this myth, this story, tie into Stoic philosophy? Well, in Donald Robertson's book, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, he notes that Marcus Aurelius, the famous Stoic philosopher and Roman emperor, was officially initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries. This was an ancient secret cult which centred around the Greek goddess Demeter. In 176 AD, following the Marcomannic Wars, Aurelius visited Athens to be initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries. He even paid for the rebuilding of the temple complex, which had been damaged during the war. As a mark of his patronage, a bust of Aurelius was placed above the main gate of the temple precinct, and this artefact still remains among the ruins today. So let's have a look at the themes of this story and how we can relate it to our lives today. We have cycles and rebirth. So eating the food of the dead inextricably binds Persephone to the underworld. She is taken to the underworld by Hades, and the resulting compromise means she has to spend half the year with him in the underworld, and the other half she's allowed to spend with her mother Demeter. This was the ancient Greek way of explaining the changing seasons. So her return in the spring symbolises fertility, rebirth, and agricultural renewal. This is all about an acceptance of things we cannot change, which of course we know with the Stoic dichotomy of control is very relevant here. So Persephone shifts from being the sheltered maiden of spring to the queen of the underworld. The pomegranate seeds represent her existence in 2 different realms simultaneously, and this obviously straddles these boundaries between light and dark, the underworld and then the world in which she exists with her mother. This myth also represents the theme of innocence and then maturation. In many traditional and modern literary readings, the seeds symbolise a forced transition from childhood to adulthood. Tasting the pomegranate seeds alters Persephone's identity and changes this relationship she has with her protective mother. This myth also contains a theme of consent. While older myths portray Hades tricking or forcing Persephone to eat the seeds against her will, many retellings, specifically feminist, reframe this moment, and these interpretations see Persephone willfully consuming the seeds, seizing her own power, and taking ownership of her dark duality. She is claiming her sovereignty here. And we see this when she in fact becomes Hades' right-hand woman, as it were. So this is a heavy weight of choices she is undergoing here. And she has the choice only whether to accept it or not. As we know with the dichotomy of control, it's all about accepting change. Because in fact, the process of acceptance is the only thing within our control. So she initially refuses to eat, and then eventually she breaks her fast in the underworld and her fate is sealed. She is making a choice. In his writings, Aurelius looks at the idea of loss, acceptance, and he accepts that letting go of our irrational desire to control the natural timing of things, the nature of things in fact, the lives of our loved ones and the decisions we have to make, affords us inner peace. He said, loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight. So as Stoics we understand it's important to focus on our own character and actions while accepting the natural order of the world involves things constantly coming and going. These are, of course, externals, indifference. We will face loss, it's guaranteed. We will experience seasons of our life, that's a guarantee. We will see growth, and we will also be able to reap the harvest of the seasons which are identifiably the good times, if you like. This is a guarantee. But of course we understand these are all externals, and as such they are outside of our circle of control. So what lessons can we learn today from this Greek myth? Although Persephone was eventually returned to our world, this was only temporary. Her mother was forced, this is Demeter, was forced to accept recurring periods during which her child was absent. And she came to understand this was part of the natural order of things. So there was an acceptance there. And what we need to do today is accept that this is not weakness. This is an active choice that we can make to protect our inner peace. Change will happen. It's how we react to that change that is the only thing within our circle of control. Marcus Aurelius said, "To look for the fig in winter is the act of a madman, and as such, he who looks for his child when it's no longer allowed is the same thing." This myth of Persephone and the pomegranate seeds provides a powerful metaphor for radical acceptance, emotional resilience, and personal growth. If we practice amor fati, if we love our fate, if we accept our fate, we are representing here Persephone, who's eating the pomegranate seeds and accepting her fate. She understands there's a compromise to be made. She has been taken. She is now in the underworld. What does she do with that? She says, okay, well, I have a choice. Do I make the best of this, or do I suffer indefinitely? Once the seeds were consumed, instead of being destroyed by her circumstances, she went on to embrace in this myth the dual role as queen of the underworld and the goddess of spring. She worked this situation to her advantage. And we see this with many female heroes from past stories. This is the ultimate in empowerment. Her abduction, of course, was out of her control, but her reaction to her time in the underworld was within her control. So this is the lesson we are taking from this myth, recognizing that all things are temporary. That will maintain our inner peace. That will keep the walls of our inner citadel high. And of course, this cycle of Persephone being in the underworld and then of course returning in the spring to our world mirrors this impermanent nature of life. It teaches us to appreciate the summer without being overly attached to it, and to endure the winter, and in fact come to accept, acknowledge and even celebrate that change, because ultimately change means we're alive. We are growing, we are developing, we are coming to understand. Marcus Aurelius famously noted, "The obstacle is the way. The difficulty is the way." The difficulty Persephone faced became a catalyst for her to become an independent, powerful ruler. So translating this to our life today for us, well, let's look at our journal task. As you know, each week we have a journal task. And today's journal task is all about the seasons. I would like you to consider the seasons of your life and list the benefits in each of the seasons that you have experienced so far. This is a positive exercise. This is the transformation of adversity into something actually really positive. And in this exercise, we come to acknowledge and so celebrate the rewards that each season brings. Celebrating the positive is, of course, within our power of control. If you like the messages you've heard today, if this resonates with you, please consider following the podcast and liking and subscribing to the channel. It really supports this educational endeavour, and what we're trying to do here is create a community of women who are coming to a point of literary empowerment, connecting the literary masters and the stories we have been handed down to our lives today, in order that we can use those messages, take those lessons and benefit from them. I shall see you next time, live on YouTube, 3 p.m. every Friday, the Female Stoic Podcast. See you then. Bye.
Hey, Stephanie here. Thank you for listening to the Female Stoic Podcast. It is an honour, and I just want to say I really appreciate you being here. It's amazing the power of women in literature and the Stoic messages they have to share. Please, if you can, return the favour by spreading their words and sharing this podcast far and wide so more of us can benefit from their wisdom. And don't forget to leave a review if you like what you heard. See you next time.